The Queen of Heaven is a pagan god. Literally it is in Jeremiah. And God wastes the land of Judah because the women who were kneading dough and giving food, drink, and incense offerings up to that Queen of Heaven would not stop. God gave warning after warning after warning. Then he told them what would happen. Their land would lay waste. They would be handed over to their enemies. Famine would wreck them and their heirs, their children, and a disease. They still went on to pray to the Queen of Heaven in Jeremiah. God gives tons of warnings in the Bible before he rains wrath down. It would be a good idea to listen to all of the people that are trying to warn. Get away from the Catholic Church. It is a den of wickedness. Mary is all over the place at the Vatican. It is the reason the history of the Catholic Church is wrecked with child abuse. Because this Queen of Heaven goes back to a pagan god that the true God knows very well, which is why he said, stop doing what you're doing. But the Catholic religion wanted to come on the tails that they're about Christianity, but as Jesus said, all will be deceived. And the best way to deceive, especially the nation that was founded by the very people that were fleeing that Church of England, that Catholicism, is to get God to become rageful at America. Because as it is in the Bible, when God becomes rageful, he becomes wrath. Wrath is handed down. So the pagan religions know the true God very well. They just don't want to follow that God. They also know that the only way to get America to her knees is to get God to remove protection. The only way they can do that is to bring in false religions while telling you it's about the Catholicism is about Christianity. No, it's not. Again, it's very obvious. God would never let so many children go on to be abused. It's because people lack knowledge, as the Bible says, lack knowledge to see the truth. This is not a time to get lost in your ego if you're a parishioner. It's time to just get away from it. Many people say, well, we don't worship Mary. No, you do. All over the Vatican, all over the Catholic churches, Mary is so huge, it's ridiculous. Nowhere in the Bible does Jesus talk about his mother having a crown, being coronated, being called the Queen of Heaven. But I will tell you where the Queen of Heaven is mentioned in Jeremiah, when God literally rains wrath down on Judah because they won't stop it. They won't stop making cakes to the Queen of Heaven. And this is just one of many prayers, because what did the Catholic Church do? It brought in heresy. So there's a reason you're seeing some of these people push Catholicism. You're seeing it more and more on YouTube, everywhere. And it wants to get as many people on the false path as possible. Because again, it needs God to become so angry and rageful at America that God lifts his protection and turns us over, just like in the Bible. Very important to recognize that at this time, because I would say that we're at that hour, that last hour. I'm not going to read all of this because it's so blasphemous, but if you see right where the baby's hand is, starting there, this confidence should inspire us to pray fervently to her, to love her in return, and to form a practical resolution of imitating her. Absolutely not. Jesus literally said to imitate him. So this is how easy they play people. And yet I get people that get in my comment section saying it's the first church. No, yeah, the first church of paganism. That's what you want to call it. It's certainly not anything to do with Peter. This isn't the only place in Jeremiah. It's mentioned many times, the Queen of Heaven, to stop it. The children gather wood, and the fathers kindle the fire, and the women knead their dough to make cakes to the Queen of Heaven, and to pour out drink offerings unto other gods, that they may provoke me to anger. And they end up that's exactly what happens. And they end up being devoured by their enemies, because eventually the warnings run out. Eventually you need to take an action step and stop doing the things God doesn't want you to do. So literally the fact that this is in the Bible, in the book of Jeremiah, is enough to tell you what the Catholic Church is all about. I'm sorry, I'm not trying to be cruel to Catholic parishioners at all, because most people are innocent. But just don't get stuck in your ego. Just receive the message and move away from it. Again, kneading dough, making cakes. Recipes for May, month dedicated to the Blessed Virgin Mary. It's really a pagan deity going all the way back to Egypt. It goes way, way far back. It's the reason God knew it was a pagan deity. I mean, of course God would know, but that's what it is. That's why none of it lines up with the Bible. So literally there's some Catholics, and you don't really know who, but some of them that literally want to take people down the false path, because they are trying to get America to be turned over to our enemies. I would say many people in Congress that are Catholic, some may be misguided. Many know that, well, they know what their role is. Say, for instance, Mike Johnson, just a guess. And others. Cookies for Our Lady here, making cakes to the Queen of Heaven, the very thing that enraged God. If people in the Catholic religion at this point can't see, then they're too stuck in their ego, or they deliberately want to keep leading you down that false path. Again, it's about getting as many people down a false path. It doesn't matter if it's occultism, Catholicism, or it's atheism. All of them will do the trick for the wicked people that want to have their hands devour America. The Vatican is about worshiping a pagan deity. This pagan deity gets to be used in many different ways, and as you can see, this pagan deity, which does not represent Mother Mary, because it goes against actually what the Bible talks about Mary as. But this is a great way to get people to believe that this is Mother Mary, but then you can use those pagan gods in other ways to help enrage God even more, such as this. The Statue of Freedom that came from Rome. This doesn't represent anybody in the history of America. It's just a big, big, big idol. Yeah, with stars around its head. Not only inside the Capitol, but on top of the Capitol. And so you covertly, slowly bring in these different idols and make it seem very innocent. And then the Texas Capitol ends up putting up what's called the Statue of Freedom as well on top of their Capitol. And slowly, little by little, you eventually take America into that it being a country that's just full of paganism, because it's filled with a bunch of idols everywhere. For whatever reason, the Statue of Freedom was on our money, even the $5 bill, on postage stamps, even on our medals. Yet this is somebody that it doesn't really represent anything in America's history. It doesn't represent anybody specifically. But more than that, it certainly takes a country that was founded under the true biblical Jesus Christ, that our founders, the Pilgrims that fled this false religion, they fled that and made the covenant here. This is exactly what the enemies of that covenant would do, is fill America with nothing but idols everywhere. That's one way. And then bring in the false church and make it the biggest false Christian church in the world, which is Catholicism. If there's not enough evidence for you at this point that this is all paganism and you've been played, then you don't want to see it, and you'll let your ego get in the way. But Jesus literally warns you of this. And all throughout the Bible, people warn others and say, get away from it, get away from it. Because eventually God will rain holy wrath down on it. Because God expects the people that truly walk with him to realize it. It doesn't mean you're damned, you just need to get away from it. Queen of Heaven is literally a pagan deity going all the way back to Egypt.